Hello, I wanted to make this video because I'm hearing a lot of people express concern over the current state of things and what may happen over the next few months. Now, whether you are of the mindset that this is all just because of politics and because it's an election year, and that everything's going to be fine on November 4th, we're going to go back to normal, COVID will be over, all this stuff will go away on November 4th, regardless of who wins. Or if you're more like me and you're thinking, you know what, maybe that some of this has to do with elections, but I think there's more going on here. I think there's something more fundamental that's happening, and that we'll certainly see escalations of craziness of, whatever, whether it's COVID or uprisings or something brand new that we haven't even seen yet. Whatever it is that, may happen, if you're like me and you think this is going to continue, or even if you think it's going to be over on November 4th, there are 5 things that I'm going to recommend to everyone to do. And not everyone's going to do these things, and some of you are going to be like, well, that doesn't apply to me. These are things that I'm recommending. You can take it or leave it. But I think they're crucially important, and that the more people who follow this list of 5 things, the better. I think the better we're going to be able to survive whatever the rest of 2020 throws at us. So here's the quick list, and I can do more videos, or I can answer questions on my live stream or through my Tumblr if you have questions or want clarification on some of these things. But number 1 is go to church. And when I say go to church, I don't just mean tune into a live stream. I mean go to church. Go to an in-person church service. And if your church is not doing in-person services at this point, I would honestly recommend that you find a church that is. The fact that so many churches rolled over and stopped having in-person church services because the government told them to is very concerning. Thankfully, some churches maybe temporarily rolled over, or kind of, we're like, oh, maybe we'll shut down. But a lot of churches are reopening, and maybe they're finding ways to work around the existing rules. But go to a church that is having some kind of in-person service, even if it's not your regular church. If you want recommendations for churches in your area, let me know and give me your zip code, and I can try and help you find something that a church that I would go to, even just from my perspective as a confessional Lutheran. So that's number 1, just go to church. We need to have our priorities in order. And if these are, some people call them the end times, if things are only getting worse from here, have your priorities in order, have your stuff in order. Don't get so obsessed with the news and with everything crazy going on that you forget the things that are most important. And if we all only have a short time left here on this earth, I would be concerned about what comes after. So if nothing else, go to church. Number two is buy a gun if you don't have one already. And if you do have one, buy another. I always say, at least, what's one more gun? But buy a gun and learn how to use it. If you'll be a first-time gun owner, or like if you've never bought a gun before, or you recently bought your first gun, congratulations. If you're new to gun ownership, please take a class. Please go to a range. Most gun ranges have range officers who will be happy to help you if you are new to gun ownership, or and many of these ranges offer classes for first-time gun owners or for new gun owners. If you need to get a concealed carry or license to carry in your state, get it. Okay, do what you need to do, get armed, and have ammo. Have a weapon that you can use. Make sure you know how to use it. Make sure you're comfortable using it. Have ammunition for it, and be prepared to defend yourself and your family, right? Because the time may come where you are the only thing standing between your family and somebody who wants to hurt you or to take what you have. Number 3 is to store 2 to 3 weeks of food and water. In a short-term crisis, and by short-term I mean something that lasts days to maybe a couple of weeks. In a short-term crisis, you could be cut off from normal food supplies, or we could run into another situation where there are shortages of things in the grocery store like there were in March. Store up 2 to 3 weeks worth of food and water just in case. And in Los Angeles, you're seeing the Los Angeles mayor cut off utilities from homes that don't comply with COVID rules. So you may find yourself in a situation where you are cut off from your utilities for whatever reason. Maybe today it's failing to follow COVID rules. Maybe tomorrow it's something else. Who knows? But 2 to 3 weeks of food and water, have that stored up. If possible, they sell these great pails of freeze-dried food, like Augustin Farms, Mountain House. There's different places, Wise Company. There's different places that sell these pails, these buckets of freeze-dried food, and that's a great way to do it. That's simple and easy to store, and easy to take with you if you need to leave. So that's a great way to store up food. And then water just in those gallon jugs. The simple as that. Number 4. So number 4 is to assemble a mutual aid, mutual defense community. Some people may already have kind of a mutual aid community set up because of COVID. A lot of neighborhoods set these up because people needed groceries, people needed supplies, people were stuck in their homes, especially vulnerable people. So you may already have a mutual aid community. What you need to make sure you also have is mutual defense community, so that if something crazy happens, you and your neighbors, you and your community can work together to defend each other, to defend each other's property, to defend each other's lives. We may reach the situation, especially in some parts of the country, where you and your neighborhood need to set up a rotating watch, where somebody's kind of on guard 24/7, and you need to have that system rotating, and preferably all those people need to be armed. So if your mutual aid group is not the type, if you're like, they're not the gun owner type, you may need to look elsewhere. And here's my other thing, because I always see this set up, get to know your neighbors and form a little neighborhood community. I am in a situation where I do not feel comfortable going to my neighbors and talking to them about being armed and having a neighborhood watch set up. Instead, I have found a community that does not necessarily live around me, but that is a community of friends and family members that I know, whose views I know, whose capabilities I know, and who have all expressed interest in this venture. And so while we do not all live in the same general vicinity, we have a plan where we have a location that we can all gather in the event of a crisis, of a true crisis, where especially, I'm kind of going to be one of the first ones of our group who's going to have to leave, mostly in most scenarios. But where we have a point where we can all gather, and from there kind of assemble our community. For now, we're all in our separate homes, but in the event of a true uprising, civil unrest, whatever crisis it may be, I have somewhere to go, and I have a community who I'm going to. Last one, number 5, is figuring out what you can barter. So we are looking at a lot of financial trouble looming. A lot of people are already in very deep financial trouble because they've lost their job, because they have not had income for months at this point, or maybe they've had unemployment benefits, maybe not. There's a lot of people who are really, really struggling financially right now. And there's also a lot of people who may not be struggling financially now, but are in precarious positions. And I think we are all in a precarious position because our currency, I do not believe is stable. And I do not believe we have very long before we enter into a hyperinflation scenario, such as has been seen in Zimbabwe, the Weimar Republic, Venezuela. We've seen this happen in other countries. I don't think we're very far from that scenario. So just given the way that our government is acting, the way that the Federal Reserve is acting, I don't think we have very long before that happens. I hope I'm wrong. I hope we're all going to be fine. I hope November 4th is going to roll around and everything's going to be fine, and some people are going to be mad because their team didn't win. But I'm hoping November 4th rolls around and we're all fine. But in the event that I'm right, and we do have a financial currency collapse, not just, a financial collapse like 2008 or like the Great Depression, but a collapse of our currency, you need to know what you can barter when your money becomes worthless, or when your money is gone. So this could be supplies that you have. Maybe you have more than 2 to 3 weeks of food and water saved up. Maybe you have extra food. Maybe you have other extra, you know, maybe you garden and you have produce that you can barter with people. Like maybe you have a fruit tree. A fruit tree is always a great one because it usually produces way more than you can eat anyway. And then you can can those fruits, make them into preserves, things like that. And those can be things you can barter. Or skills. So if you have first aid skills or any other medical training, let's say you're a nurse or a doctor, or you generally have some kind of EMT medical training, that can be something you barter. Maybe you join up with a community and you're saying, hey, I have medical knowledge and I can benefit you in that way. Or maybe it's maybe you're really good at sewing, or maybe you have some other kind of knowledge or skill. Maybe you have outdoor survival skills. Maybe you have exceptional cooking skills. You know how to do a lot with very little, food wise. Whatever that may be, and think about a situation in which technology is not necessarily our thing of most value. So if your primary skill is something like coding or, some kind of a software engineer, think about what other skills you might have in addition to that. Like that may end up being a good skill for you to have, but we may enter into a situation where there's other skills needed, where that is not necessarily the top priority or the most valuable skill like it is currently in today's society. So those are our 5 things that I think are most important. And just to sum them up really quick, number 1 is go to church. Number 2 is buy a firearm and learn how to use it. Number 3 is store 2 to 3 weeks of food and water. Number 4 is have a mutual aid, mutual defense community. And number 5 is learn what you can barter. So those are my 5 things. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I can do further videos on them in the future, but I just wanted to get this one out there and give people those 5 things that they can do right now or in this next week. Like just make that your thing for this next week, is to put those 5 things in order. Keep these things in mind and think about these things and which ones do you already have taken care of and which ones do you need to take care of. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next week on the live stream, if not before then, if I post some more videos.